Welcome to Vows and Visuals. Today on the podcast, we have Amber Renee, one of my favorite wedding photographers located in Billings, Montana. She has been featured in Montana Bride, Rocky Mountain Bride, and has won awards for Billings' Best Photographer. She is one of my deepest and closest friends who has allowed and helped me to jumpstart my business when I was just starting out. So tell me about, let's start off by just kind of talking about like your wedding over this last weekend and how was it?
This last weekend, it was actually a really good wedding. One you would have enjoyed. They, a couple weeks before, had a bear in their house and they had to shoot a bear in their living room. It was sleeping on their couch where the venue is at. They got married at their own house. So that was the beginning of their nuptials. And then the wedding downpoured. It rained, and it rained only at the reception though.
Oh my God, that is terrible.
Yeah, it was an interesting one. Best bride and groom though. But yeah, it was great all day. Thunder and lightning all day. We were convinced it was going to rain. It didn't. We got all the pictures done until the reception. So even all their first dances outside, downpour.
Oh.
They partied. They turned on Hannah Montana and they just partied it up in the rain.
It's honestly like one of the best ways to do it.
That's what I thought too. And I'm over here, covering my camera, trying not to get everything. And in one of my videos, they see all the guests at the wedding bring a tent over the bridal party. And so they danced under the tent, which actually made for really fun pictures because it was white and colorful and it was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah, it was pouring. It was one of the wettest weddings I've had to do. Yeah.
That's the worst. Cause I mean, you got to like deal with your cameras. You have to deal with her if she really cares about her dress.
By then, we had already done, we went off to where we took pictures for their engagement session, which is up in the mountains. Got all the really pretty, beautiful pictures. So it was just the dancing part. And honestly, by then, they didn't care.
Good. I love when brides and grooms are like that. They can just kind of roll with it. And
they have to adapt.
Deal with it. And that's the best way. Yeah. What would you recommend would be like something that you could prepare for as a photographer, basically, to like help out a situation like that where you have to worry about like adapting and stuff like that? What would you recommend?
I think I just tell people the biggest thing is no matter what, they're going to get married. You can't stress it. Don't look at the weather app. Don't do it. I'll do that for you. I'll stress for you. But, if you know that there's a chance that there's going to be rain, pick some cool umbrellas. We usually have that. There's always going to be something that goes wrong at your wedding. Just go in there expecting that.
I agreed. I mean, every wedding is so different, but I mean, there's so many different things of like, there's so many things that happen during a wedding day that the bride and grooms don't even know about.
It's usually us that we're like, oh God, can you go find so-and-so? Like pick a person. I always tell my brides, pick a person you trust that's not the maid of honor, but has all the information to call any vendor because things do happen. I mean, we've had flowers forgotten, or the cake doesn't show up, or the food doesn't show up,
or a dress gets ran over.
Or a dress gets ran over by a golf cart and puts some huge tire marks, and Landon and I are in there scrubbing with everything you can think of. Shit's going to happen.
Absolutely. I could not agree more.
You can't prepare for tire tracks. We are going to have to replenish our Tide wipes because we used all of those and everything else, but you can't prepare for everything. You can prepare a little bit for weather, but honestly, go in there knowing that it's going to happen. It's going to happen no matter what. And usually it's just a little thing. You're going to move on. You're still going to get married. It's still your day. We all survived COVID. I think we can get through these weddings if it's just a little minor detail.
I couldn't agree more. So let's jump a little bit into and let's talk about like what got you into photography even in the first place and why you kind of do what you do.
Well, I'm pretty lucky because I come from a line of photographers, but my great-grandfather actually has work I think he's in the Met in New York. He was a wildlife photographer, so he worked for Outdoor Life. So that's kind of where I got my inspiration. My grandma was a music teacher, but she was all into the arts. So she got me my first pinhole camera. Have you ever seen it?
I think so. I think that kind of came back. It's a little like TikTok trend.
Cool. Yeah, so you can make them. She got me that when I was younger. It's always been a big part of me. My little brother's always been into film as well. It just kind of ran in our blood. So I was going to school for teaching at Montana State. Go Bobcats. And I took some of their film and photography classes. Really loved it, but knew that I was going to be a teacher. So it was just kind of that added end. Taught for a little while, moved back to Billings, got my first teaching job. Didn't love it. Didn't love teaching. Knew that I wanted something more. So to supplement my income, I started shooting. And you make a little bit better money when you do photo. And then I had a chance to stay home with Ella And I did, and then decided I'm equally a bad stay-at-home mom as I was a teaching mom. So I decided to be a photographer. And that was, so 8 years ago, I quit teaching.
Okay, that's awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
do you think your teaching helps in your wedding business at all?
Absolutely. I think the biggest addition is giving directions because firsthand, we got to give directions, especially to bridal parties, but just the organization. And I'm not a horribly organized person, as we know, but I do think that that background helped a ton. I love it. I miss teaching, and I think that's why I enjoy doing small classes and, beginners photography, anything like that. I love the teaching aspect, and I love to be able to incorporate it. A lot of little things kind of carried over. So I'm not using my actual degree, but I still bring it over.
That's awesome. I mean, so do you teach classes like stuff like that now that really translates over? What's that?
I do. I do beginners classes once or twice a year, and I love that for people that get a camera for Christmas because we all know someone who gets a camera and they're like, I want to be a photographer. And that's great and all. We've all done that. But a lot of times you're like, oh, it's just got an A and it's got an M and it's got all these weird things. I want to help people turn their camera on and not just shoot an A. I want to teach them the basics that I had to teach myself. I didn't take any classes besides, I was developing film at MSU. I wasn't, I didn't pick up a digital camera. That's not what we did. So I love to be able to teach that once or twice a year. And then I do a lot of photo retreats where, styled shoots. Weddings are my passion, so I'd rather do that. And I think I'd rather teach other people to be wedding photographers versus just being a regular photographer.
So what made you decide like you really want to be like a wedding photographer when there's so many different genres you could have gone from wildlife to, just straight portraiture like some of them do here?
Well, first of all, the money.
No,
Money's better. The money's
couldn't
better.
agree.
But no, I love showing up to a wedding because they have so much trust in you. It's such a good feeling knowing that their faith is in you for that day. And I love showing up because they're 99% of the time, they're very happy. It's not a stressful situation. We have had some crazy weddings, but there's just something different about weddings. And if you're a wedding photographer, there are people that'll come up to me and be like, I will never do weddings. I will do anything other than weddings. And
Which, I feel like we almost get like every wedding. Somebody
Yeah.
comes up, they're like, I don't know how you do this.
Yeah,
Like, do you ever have your
absolutely.
bridezilla? But I feel like most of the time I feel like especially just with like pre-planning and meeting brides and stuff like that prior, like bridezillas really isn't that big of a deal as
No.
people make it seem like almost.
And if they're a bridezilla, it's not really toward us. Like they may be a bridezilla to their bridesmaids, but bridesmaids are hard sometimes, and it's a lot of responsibility for a bridesmaid. I get it, but the bridezilla doesn't come out to us. I think it's the complete opposite. They're like, I'm really stressed out. How do you feel about this? And then for a fact that they do value your opinion. They trust your opinion. They know exactly what they expect from you. And like you said, we have meetings ahead of time. We don't just show up at a wedding and be like, I've never met this person. I don't know. I've done a couple of elopements like that, and that's fine, but we've usually talked a few times or emailed. But I think that makes it so much better. We avoid the bridezilla, and that's not a super common thing. I think people use it a little bit more loosely than it really is. I don't feel like we have a lot. I think it just depends on the person, but we get to pick the people we work with.
Absolutely.
We kind of weed out those bridezillas because we also don't want to work with them.
We want to enjoy the day almost as much as they do too.
Absolutely. And we have a good time. Like they do trust us. It's a ton of fun. Like we've had some really good weddings.
Yeah.
And brides and grooms, we have a really good time.
That's awesome. So what do you think you do that like sets yourself apart from other photographers in the industry? Because it is such a convoluted and there's so many people of
Right.
like it's just so oversaturated.
Yeah.
And me and Will talk about this all the time of like there's so many photographers, and that's kind of why we branch into the videography side
Yeah.
of things. But what do you do as a photographer that set yourselves apart that other ones don't?
Oh, it's a loaded question. It's one of those like, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses
Right.
on applications? And you just kind of think about it. I think my personality sells myself. That's a really big deal. I think the way my photos look, there's so many different styles. There's like super moody or light and airy. I would say my photos are they're pretty close to color. I think the way we show up, and it's, not just you and I, but when I have a team with me, we are put together. We know what we're doing, and we get a lot of compliments like, wow, you really made this day work well. So much word of mouth is what sets me aside, is I have brides telling their bridesmaids or bridesmaids that see it, and then, sorry, that's going
No,
off.
we're good.
I think that's the biggest thing is it's just people telling after, like, God, I was at a wedding that Amber did, and it flowed so well. And even when this happened, like, we were able to take care of it, or, so-and-so was usually really stressed out and she was just so calm. So I think that's a big part of it. And then another thing is, I don't just specialize in like the Billings area. I'm based in the Billings area, but I mean, I've shot weddings in 12 states now. And then I've shot 5 weddings in Mexico. And you'll never see the same thing over and over. Like, I'll do same poses and whatnot, but your wedding is very unique, and I want to keep it that way. So I think that's a big, big thing.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I mean, even I've second shot with so many different photographers and stuff. And I feel like that's one of the things why I gravitated so close to you and stuff like that, is because the wedding day it's so much fun with you. It's so easygoing. There's like no stress, which is the coolest thing. And I mean, I've heard of so many different like horror stories and stuff like that of where like the photographers ruin the day, basically. And it's like, it's ridiculous. And it shouldn't be like that, because I mean, we've met planners who are terrible, all that stuff. And we'll get into that in a little bit, but it just was, I mean, I feel like you make the day so much just less stressful than because weddings don't need to be stressful.
And everybody shouldn't be.
No, I agree.
mean, you're dropping, $50,000, and that's that's like average.
Exactly.
I mean, that Billings market's 45,000 right now, and you move anywhere else, that's a lot of money. Like, you don't want to be stressed out. And I always tell the bride, if they're running behind and they're like, oh my God, how are we doing on time? And I'm like, if you start to see me stress, then you should maybe stress. And that's such a big deal. I'm like, no, we have a lot of fun. And especially like with you and I, we have like our own little codes where we know what
just
the other
look,
person,
or I mean, the point, like, exactly.
We know what the other person's doing, and we work. I think it's the Libra in us. I think it's these October babies that we work so well. No, it just shouldn't be stressful. And we would not want to do this job. I got out of teaching because of the stress factors, that I want to show up to a wedding and love it. I think maybe that's why I love weddings the most. If you do show up,
I would agree.
I'm so excited every wedding. And there are stress factors. There are times where you're just like, if anything could go wrong, it's going to go wrong today. But our job is to prevent that, for one. And they're going to stress out if we stress out. And we have such a good time. I mean, we love what we do. We're lucky. And people always come up to us, God, you have such a great job. And I'm like, I know.
Yeah,
I know. We do. We love it.
It's so much fun, because like, to me personally, it doesn't even feel like work for the most part.
No.
You show up and you're like, hey, I get to be in front of a camera and like just capture your day for you, and everybody's having fun. And I feel, like I said, I feel like that's what really does set you apart, is making the day so much fun, because there are so many photographers who stress about all the little things that's so unnecessary. And I mean, that's one of the reasons I've become great friends with Will's, because he runs it kind of the same way we do. It's just there's no reason for a wedding day, like up to even through planning, any of that should be stressful.
Right.
It should all be fun. It should be a super easy, streamlined process and stuff like that.
Well, and I think a big part of that too, that taking the stress away. And I mean, you're still technically a newer person to the market, but you have so much information because you're constantly learning. Like, if I need anything, I know who to call, because I know you've done your research. And I'm sure Will's that way too. But like, I've been in the market strictly weddings. This is year 5 now. And it's just constant learning. Like, we know how to avoid these stressful situations. I remember when I first started out, and I would have brought, oh my God, this is embarrassing. So Ted over at Billings Open Studio, I remember the first time I was shooting in there, and something was wrong with my card. And he's like, well, did you format it? I didn't have a clue what formatting meant. Like, not a clue. And I think, God, this was probably 8 years ago, so I was still beginning. And everything I shot was on that one card. And I'm like, I look at it now, and I mean, I learned labeling from you because I'm super disorganized. But it was always surprising to me how much you do learn. And you have to constantly be teaching yourself. You're researching all the time, like, that sets you apart for being stressed out too, because apparently I'm popular. You never know. I think just, it is like teaching. Like, you're constantly having to learn. And the more you learn, the less stress it's going to be. You shouldn't go into a wedding and not have a clue what you're doing. I always tell people that want to be wedding photographers, I'm like, 2nd or 3rd shoot, and you do it for free.
Absolutely.
Because you are not going to learn anything. Like, if you throw yourself to the wolves, you're going to hate weddings.
Agreed. I mean, so me and Will just talked about this on, I believe, an episode we just shot, or 2 episodes ago, where like I guess what would you recommend saying to a photographer to reach out? Because we talked about it and we've had very bad experiences in the past where
Yeah.
we reach out and like they're just you get ghosted. They're just like, no, absolutely not. Like you've never shot a wedding. It's like, well, we're trying to get into it.
Yeah.
And they're so rude and stuff like that. So what would you recommend to photographers out there like that are just beginning and want a second shoot? How would you go about that?
I think just keep reaching out. So that's what I did. I started out and nobody was willing to let me second shoot with them. And I think that's the biggest difference of why it took me so long to get really good and like how it didn't take you as long to get good because people were willing to work with you.
Absolutely.
You know, like they were not as willing because the market was still saturated, but weddings have evolved so much in the past 5 years that keep asking, you know, and keep learning. Don't show up and be like, I just got a camera for Christmas. I want to be a wedding photographer. Like I had, luckily someone, Matt recommended you. And I'm like,
Yep.
I trust him and I trust his expertise. And he's like, he's a young kid, like just out of school. And I mean, little did I know that you'd be showing up with hairspray in your pocket and ready to run and ready to go. And we had a blast that day. But I mean, you didn't even have to reach out, but you were reaching out to people.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, can I second shoot? If they turn you down, go for someone else. If they turn you down, maybe just ask why. You know, like,
Yeah,
I
like
ask,
why
is that
it?
okay?
Yeah.
Like, I'll do it for free. I mean, I've told people, I'm like, be a camera carrier. You know, like be a caddy, a camera caddy, because you need to see how a wedding runs.
Absolutely. Because I think people very much so like fantasize weddings, be like, oh, it's so easy. All you do is just walk around and take
Right.
pictures and stuff. But there's so much more that's involved to it than
Absolutely.
just that. And
I wish we could just run around and take pictures.
it'd be so nice.
I mean,
Exactly. Right.
It'd be great. You just, you know, take the card out of your camera and you just give it to your bride and groom. And that's the end of the day. That'd be wonderful. But there'd be no market for us. An iPhone can do that.
Absolutely. I mean, so what, I mean, I know you and me have talked about this like behind the scenes, but like what have you done to not be burnt out? Because you do shoot so many weddings a year and so many like professionals in this industry get so burnt out and they're like, I'm done. And they stay stagnant and it's just stuff like that. So what have you done to kind of basically not fall into that little rabbit hole?
I think the first and foremost thing, we all get burned out. Every photographer, no matter how much you do, you're going to get burned out. We hit September and September is a hard one. And I warned you, it's like, wait till like 2/3 of your season is done and you're just going to be exhausted. You're behind on editing. Everything seems like it's taking forever and you're behind. I think what you need to do, take a break. You know, really take a break. Even if you have back-to-back weddings, sometimes I'll go 2 weeks without touching my computer and editing because I get so sick of seeing it and I don't want their edits to reflect that. I'll take a break, or what we've done and what I love to do is I'll plan a styled shoot. Yes. Or I'll do something way out of my norm because I want to do something fun and I need to like light that spark again. It'll be completely different. It will have nothing to do with weddings. I mean, and that's rare for me, but it really gets that juice flowing again. And it reminds me why I do love to do what I do. And it really, that brain break away from, there's the teacher in me, the brain break, taking a step away from everything. Put your camera down. When I go on vacations, like with my kids, I don't bring my camera. I've been around my camera enough and I'm like, an iPhone's going to take a good enough picture for my kids for my vacation, unless like I'm there for a wedding. But step back and breathe and remind yourself, especially learn a new trick, or, you know, go on TikTok or go on Instagram and follow these reels. And we'll do that quite often. Send something like, we should try this at our wedding. It's super cool.
Absolutely. I mean, it's almost weekly. We're just back and forth.
We almost forget every single time, and we have still not done half the things we want. But then you're like, I could do that, but I could do that better. And it would be really cool.
And it just sparks that creativity a little bit and be like, okay, this isn't, like we were saying, like not every wedding's the same. And how can we bring more value to it? And stuff, so.
And I think different couples as well, you know, and we don't edit everything the same. We do a lot of the same prompts, but I'll take different pictures from that specific prompt for each couple. Just everybody's different. And again, it's so unique. Or like I'm starting to do like little reels behind the scene, which is beyond me, but it's fun. Like you get to see a little bit. And I think that's just the biggest deal. Don't overwhelm yourself. Don't take too many weddings that you know you cannot handle. I mean, 40 is a lot of weddings.
Yeah, it's a ton of weddings.
That is a lot of weddings. And this year, I think with weddings and elopements from January to December, I think I'll have like 32, which is less than my normal. But I needed that.
And it allows you to actually like enjoy life and not.
Absolutely. I took a lot of August off. I think I had 3 weddings in August, which August is a huge month for us. That, I mean, I needed a break. And I'm glad I did, because then I had these September weddings and that spark is back. Like that flame is back. And I'm not taking away from these couples. It's not fair for me to show up burnt out And we have to remind ourselves of that. Like, I've done triple weekends. I had one weekend in Forsyth, Montana, and the next day I had to be in San Diego, California.
Ugh.
And it was a 5 a.m. flight. And you do what you got to do. But I had a Friday wedding too. So it was Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then you get like Monday, you're just so exhausted and so burnt out.
You have like wedding hangover, like we've talked about before.
We have wedding hangover no matter what, even if it's one wedding. But don't overdo it, especially if you're brand new. I mean, pick a number, 10 weddings at max is what, like, I think very new, experienced, but new wedding photographers. Like, I've even told you that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, dude, you took how many on? And luckily you can kind of balance it out. Your burnout might be a little better because you do video. So you can show up a little bit differently for each time.
And that's what I was going to go into is, like you were saying, like every editing and everything is a little bit different towards the couple. Like video is even crazier on that because if the couple is a lot more intimate and a lot more like quiet and stuff like that, then the video is a lot more intimate. But I mean, if they're just like that crazy couple that's out there just partying, shirts off.
We love
exactly.
Those are our favorites. Or depending on where you're at, the location.
Exactly. I mean, if it's an indoor ceremony, I mean, look at the one we just did a few months ago up at Sealy. Like, it's so different because like the ceremony location was kind of a terrible location.
Yeah,
because
it was raining.
So exactly.
It was terrible.
Even just doing it from the inside there to the outside is everything changes like that.
And I think a lot of it, we are starting to work in that higher end market that our brides are putting a lot more into it. So there's a lot more decor, so we can capture a lot more. Or when you get, again, like the party couples, they go into it and you have so much more to work with. So like for a bride and groom, put everything into that wedding. There's a lot of bride and grooms that don't want to be the center of attention. It's not as bad as you think. And nobody's really like dead eyeing you. They're there for you, but you're not like the center of attention that you have to be so scared and so stoic. Do private vows. I mean, how many times do we take people away and do private vows?
Well, they love it, and it's such a great moment for them just to kind of get away from all the hecticness of the day.
Absolutely. You get no time with your spouse.
Yeah.
No time. I mean, I spend more time with you than I do my spouse. And not so much anymore. I think, that's a big thing. I'm like, do your vows privately. Do the normal ones up with your pastor or whatever. But do it on your own, and we won't be in your face. You'll be mic'd up, but make it unique to you. Step away from it. I don't even know what your question was, but
I don't either at this point. But
like, this is Landon and I.
Right, exactly. I mean, this is how every wedding day is basically too, rambling back and forth. But so let's talk a little bit about like what is it like now working with a videographer, because you do that a lot more often now because it's such a bigger thing in the wedding industry and like
it's
starting
not
off.
Big enough
in
the wedding industry. To me.
I could not agree more. But like, guys, I mean, like I feel like when we met and everything, video wasn't even as popular, and that was only 2 years ago.
Yeah,
3 years ago.
Yeah, I think 3 years ago. Are we going into 3? I don't know.
3, something like that.
It's gotta be 3, right? Because you were like 14, I think.
14, is that what 14. It was? Okay.
This young kid. No, I love working with videographers. I truly do, and I try to push it on my brides and grooms. But even I've had to really learn like what videographers are bringing and what they offer. Like 8 to 10 minute highlight video is so much different than I think I thought it was. But I'm a lot older, so I remember you'd set up a camera and you'd capture your entire ceremony straight up the middle, which I would strangle a videographer if they stood in the middle of the ceremony the entire time. But
which we've still seen
we
to this day.
We have seen some interesting things, and especially I've seen interesting things because a lot of the times if I'm video, you're photo, or if I'm photo, you're video. But if you're not there, it's some random person, and there's a good select few, but we have so few. Like, I know the photo market is so saturated, but video, we could use so many more. But we don't want tacky, tasteless. Like, you can't just show up and think you can do a video. I've been shooting forever, and I still cannot produce a video. Like, there's so much more to it. And, like, one of our couples we had last October, Zoe, I can still see their reaction to their video. So I sent them their gallery, and their gallery is beautiful. It was the best fall time ever. It was the best fall Montana day I've ever seen. And they loved their photos, and their photos were beautiful. But then we sat down with them, and we watched the video together.
With them, yeah.
With them. And she was crying, and he got choked up hearing his vows again, which you forget about what you say, and you forget about all these things. And I may be able to freeze that moment in time, but there is nothing like reliving that actual moment. It's like an out-of-body experience. You're seeing it.
Exactly. I mean,
you're
because the day
seeing
goes
it
by. I mean,
different.
there's
It
alcohol
does.
involved. There's so many different like factors. Like you have the mother-in-law, all that stuff. You just forget about it, and
You do.
I mean, you've been planning this for what? Some people 2 years now,
Absolutely.
and you go through the day, and you're like, what even happened? You're like, it's
Yeah.
the end of the night. We're doing our grand exit, and we're
Yeah.
out of here. So seeing that, I agree, is so neat. And they're like, wow, I can actually go back and cherish these memories forever and ever
Yeah.
and ever.
And you relive it. And I absolutely love that feeling. And I love seeing them feel it as well. It is great for photo, but that's my only regret is I didn't have video. Because yeah, I have these beautiful photos, but I have no idea what our vows were.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I
And that's
have no clue.
nobody remembers that. And that's why I
No.
try to include, if they do those, I encourage my couples to write letters or private vows or something and
Anything.
put that in there, because you're not going to remember that. And nobody's
Absolutely.
going to save that piece of paper, that notebook that had it. Like maybe they will, but they're not
Yeah.
going to read it for years and
I
years.
have like 6 different couples vows because they always end up with us. Like we
Right.
throw stuff, we have stuff in our pockets by the end of the day that don't belong to us. But I have their vows. But again, it's so much different because you're in that moment, and again, you're center of attention and you're a little nervous. You have no idea what you're saying to each other. You just get to relive it in a different moment. It's so cool. And then the way you guys do it, video didn't used to be an art like it is. I always tell people, I'm like, it's art. It's very different. Your video is not going to look like someone else's. They'll be comparable, but it's such a different way to express their wedding. I love video, and I love
especially, I mean,
rewatching
it really brings out I feel like it brings out their personalities and
Absolutely.
stuff, because like I was just saying, like how it's, if they're so much like more intimate and stuff, their video is going to be way more intimate. But if they're
Yeah.
that really, really fun couple that's super like extroverted and outgoing, their video is going to feel a lot more like a hype video
Yeah,
almost too.
it's busier. It's like a fast movie, like an exciting movie. It's not the romance love novel like some of
Mhm.
our couples are.
Exactly.
Like some are super sweet, and you look at them and you're like, this is timeless. And that's how their day is going to flow no matter what. But then you see it on video, and there's so many different parts to video. It's all moving different, and down from like the song you pick for their background song. You can tell I know nothing about video, but the way it moves, you've got their vows that are the voiceover, and you've got music in the background. But even while they're saying their vows, the picture isn't the same. They're doing something else, and it just wraps the whole day up into it.
Mhm.
I love it. And I love being able to work with videographers too, because we're going to do different things and we're going to feel different things. And I'll have a prompt, and both video and I get it. But then video will be like, I need this for video because it's great. But then
Mhm.
it's also a great picture for me, and just like we work really well together. And I think a lot of the people I work with now work well with me because I communicate.
Yeah.
But like even our ceremonies they flow so well, and we're on different sides, and your ceremony, you're going to get different perspectives from video and photo.
Mhm.
I love it. I can't express
and
that enough.
I agreed, and I feel like, and that's why we work so well together when we do our like photo video
Yeah.
together. Is, I mean, even if I am in the way, it's like a tap on the shoulder, like get the hell out of the way, let's
Yeah.
go, and then we're
It's
like,
a
okay,
tap
we
on the
get it,
shoulder.
yeah.
Okay, I'm like elbowing, like,
Yeah.
get out of my way. Or we can communicate without saying anything. We're both like,
Yep. Or I
Did
can
you
just
see
like
this?
sense your presence in there, and you're like, oh, okay,
Yep,
gotta walk back.
yep. Well, luckily I'm short enough. You can just kind of like reach over the top and be like, I can still see just fine. Or I mean, now it's gotten to the point where I'll see your cameras, and if it gets super hot and it's overexposed, like I can kind of see where it's at, and I'm like, you need to check that camera. Just all sorts of different things. And I think I think the video and photo, they need to work really well together, or it is gonna be a stressful situation. I've had some interesting videographers, but I've also seen interesting photos.
I mean, do you remember the one we did at Camelot where the guy was literally, he made him do the first look 3 or 4 times?
3 or 4 times. It was very awkward. And even though I'm sure the video turned out really nice, there was no flow to it. And the worst part about, the first look, like you can't recreate that 4 times for a natural feel.
Not that look, that feeling, that surprise when you see your bride. Yeah.
I mean, you could fake it and be like, I'll do better next time. But then when it's like 3 different shots and you're like, okay, this is getting ridiculous. Set up a different camera. Even if it's a cheaper camera, buy another camera, set it up the opposite direction. I shot a wedding down in Mexico, and I was thoroughly surprised. The videographer was very talented. The language barrier was kind of an issue for us because I can come off a little robust sometimes, and he was very similar. But then when I started seeing his work, or he'd want me to slow down, it made things a lot better. But you just really, really have to communicate. And he was phenomenal. He had to do a thing or two differently than I did, or he'd see it a different angle, and he knew the area which was phenomenal. It was
Oh, I
so
can
nice to know
imagine.
someone who knew that area. And I'm like, okay, is this illegal? Can we go over this? And he's like, I wouldn't recommend it. And I'm like, I don't want to be in Mexican jail, so I'll take your advice. But there's so many different things that video can offer that I can't offer. And that's why I push it. It is an investment.
Yeah,
But so
I
is
agree.
photo.
Mhm.
Photo's an investment as well. You know, and I think we've talked about this so much. Communication is the key. Contracts are the key.
Agreed. What would you recommend your couples, like, for either photo or video? What would you recommend them, like, questions to ask, like, your photographer when hiring them to kind of weed out those people who isn't going to fit with their personality, that could impact their day? Because, I mean, we always say this, like, with emails, like, your email voice is so much different than your in-person voice. That's why I personally like to Zoom call with all my
You're
couples.
terrible at
I
email.
know. I'm so bad, and I
It's like,
can't write.
Chat
I can't
GPT,
spell.
write this email for me. And I'm the opposite. I love to write.
So
I love to write.
what would you recommend your couples, like, questions that they could ask that would allow them to really understand, like, your personality and of the photographer that they're hiring?
Well, I think Zoom call is great. I hate Zoom because I've got kids and it's just chaos. But picking up the phone, you need to be able to hear somebody. What are you doing? Where are you going?
This camera shut off, I just realized. On you.
Can you see the other one?
Crap, I don't know when it died, so we'll have to do a lot of more wide angle of that. That's fine. Okay, well, we can start that back over. But, like, yeah, like, so what would you recommend a couple, what would you recommend them saying to you, or, like, emailing or reaching out to you to figure out to find the right photographer that fits their personality and stuff?
Gosh, we're all so different. All of our personalities. And like I already said, I'm a loud person. Like, I'm a busy, loud person all the time. And I think they need to get on the phone with me. It's not even so much about the questions. It's just the fact that I'm going to rub people wrong. I've had a couple fire me because I shot a same-sex wedding. They fired me the next day when they saw that. And they just said our goals are different and our, you know, which is fine. They weed themselves out usually. I put a lot of stuff out there on social media. I'm very transparent. Like, you're going to know that I have kids. You're going to know that there's stuff going on. I think them asking what my ideal day looks like, because my ideal day is going to look way different than other photographers. Some are just going to show up and they're going to be like, hey, where are we at? And to me, well, even you, which doesn't always happen, but I love to build the schedule, or I know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen. And I think they need to ask that. Like, okay, so I have this situation where my parents aren't married and my dad has a new girlfriend and they don't really get along, and I can talk them off a cliff. I'm like, you know what? That's not a big deal. That's not a big deal. I think they really just need to hear your voice. They need to talk to you. Budget's a big thing. Get your budget out there first, because you're going to weed out people that don't want to pay that. Which we are. We're in a higher market. We cost a little bit more, but we're worth it in a good way. I'm like, we are worth it. We work our butts off. I think more about my brides and grooms than I think about anybody else. And it gets weird. You're like, okay, I've been thinking about you all week. And they look at you and I'm like, you know what I mean?
You're like, don't worry about it.
Yeah, not a big deal. But it's not even so much that. Just don't. Email is great, but you also have to remember that we're not always checking our email. We're not always checking our text messages. And especially for me, I'll go days without checking something just because I'm busy. You know, don't hesitate to text us or call us. And I always get, this is obviously after I'm hired, but I tell them, I'm like, reach out to me. You know, if you have any questions, you know, or colors or anything, I'm very honest. You can ask me anything and I'm going to tell you the truth. And you know this, you're not going to love the truth, but sometimes you need to hear it. And I think it's a big trust thing that they can ask anything. They just need to know, like, what's important to us too, because we want to capture your day. We do. We need all these things, but we want to make it memorable. And I feel like, especially when we shot down in California, Sonoma. Yeah, wine country.
Sonoma.
I mean, how many people came up to us and like, we had such a blast. Like, you know, I wish I would have known you when I got married, or when I get married, Landon's going to be my groom. That was one of the things. But they're like, next time if I get married, I would love for you to be there, because the way everything flowed and communication, and we put everything into their wedding. We don't do it half-assed. We don't show up and just think, okay, you know, we'll be fine. Your watch going off too. Is it just
right?
I'm like, yeah, nobody ever calls me or texts me when I need them to. But
and then we do this and everybody
just
starts blowing up.
Hey, I'm like, can't talk to you now. But yeah, it's just all about, you need to present yourself. And I've told Landon this, you're selling yourself. You really are. It's not your business. You take great pictures. You do great video. You're still selling yourself because you can have some really off-putting people that do phenomenal work. And we don't vibe with everybody.
Agreed.
We can be a lot, especially you and I together. We're a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people just need to know that you're important to us. You are everything to us on your wedding day. We like how our system works and kind of walk them through it because it is going to weed people out. And depending on certain kind of venues too. There's venues that I won't shoot at. They're not going to spend what they do on me to not get the style that I go for, you know?
Yeah. Well, so I guess let's talk about the venues real quick. What are your top 3 venues that you absolutely love in the state of Montana that you would recommend if you said, okay, let's change it up actually a little bit. Let's do, what are your top 3 ones based off of start with your lowest budget, your middle budget, and then your third one be your highest?
Okay, most of them I don't know a ton of their budget-wise. Like my number 1 right now is Fox Fields and Red Lodge. Like I think a big part of it has to do with you get it for 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
The owners are phenomenal, and they built this big, beautiful barn. They have the best view in Red Lodge. Like Red Lodge is already pretty, but they lucked out. They have the best view. So I think and their budget is really friendly. We were talking to them about it. I mean, what they charge for the 3 days, like you guys should charge more. And I already told them that. So Fox Fields is number 1, one of my absolute favorites. That's kind of in our market here. I love working at Camelot. I feel like Camelot is it's just easy no matter what. Like we get great shots there every time. It's always pretty smooth. Like there's not a ton of scenery, but there's a lot to work with.
And it can hold a lot of people.
It can hold a lot of people. It's very budget friendly for our area, I think. You know, Bozeman, there's so many. And I don't think there's any similar. Like the Big Yellow Barn is one of my top favorites, but I got married there, so I feel like I'm a little partial to it. But they're all different in Bozeman. And then, I mean, you go from Billings to the Bozeman market, and the prices are just absolutely insane.
Doubled, sometimes tripled. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Absolutely. So, I mean, it just really depends. Big Sky's same. It gets even bigger. I really love, what is it? The ranch one out in Big Sky. It's not Rainbow Ranch, but...
Hardscrabble?
Gosh, I can't think of what it is anymore. Anyways... You were at the one where he got shot with an arrow, or the planner got shot with an arrow, right? Or cut with an arrow.
That's
venue.
the 307 or something like that.
Yeah, no, that's Wyoming. 307 is Wyoming. So 360 Ranch.
Yes, 360. Okay, we'll get there eventually.
Yeah, we'll be 2 a.m. Like, oh, I just thought of it. But yeah, another horror story. The arrow in the leg. They didn't get shot. That was just a miscommunication. But I think that one's a really pretty one too. It's hard. It really just depends on your budget. The lower budgets around here, for anywhere that I shoot, is probably around that Camelot. Like I don't shoot in a lot of the smaller venues, like the Elks Clubs, thing like that. Like your whole wedding might be kind of what I charge. Your whole wedding budget might be there. Plus, you don't want to pay for somebody with a different style, pay so much that they can't provide that for you. Agreed. You know, I mean, all the stuff that we work with, we have big scenery. We have big, beautiful views. So if you get married at one of these places, I'm not going to be able to provide that for you. So I'll send you
you'll have cars in the background, all that stuff. Yeah. And it's like, you'll be like, oh, I looked at these photos on your website and saw this. And then you go and look at your pictures and you're like, what is going on?
Yeah, totally different. I think the Billings Depot is a really big one down here that I absolutely love. But it's completely different. It's completely different. There's no scenery, but I love the Depot. I love that timeless downtown feel. I absolutely love it.
I agree.
So it depends.
Is that camera rolling still?
Still rolling.
Okay, I just got to make sure,
Yeah, it's still rolling.
Okay. You shut off earlier. Awesome. So let's just finish this episode off now with I want to hear one of your best horror stories from a wedding. I know you have a bunch of them, but I want to hear.
You might need to remind me on a couple because I'm trying to think. I'm like, oh my God. I'll recommend no drugs.
I would also agree with that.
Don't do drugs, which the best way to put it, you're going to avoid our contract if you do drugs. Sometimes, I mean, maybe you're really cool and you do drugs, but we don't want to deal with it. People taking edibles is a big thing. Had that happen. I wouldn't recommend it, especially if you're the bride or the groom, because it's going to ruin your day.
Agreed.
It's going to make things a lot harder. Being attacked by a planner, equally fun. Like our wonderful planner up at Sealy Lake. Everything else was amazing. Everything.
The
was
couple,
amazing.
the people.
The couple, the families, everybody. Planner had a vendetta against me I had never met him. And we showed up that day and he did not want to deal with me.
No,
I'm pretty relaxed and chill. It was over one email and I just said, can't wait to work with you guys. And he sent a rude email back and was like, Amber, my name is, won't say it.
Right.
Not Guys. And that was it. And I messaged him back and I said, well, unfortunately, there was multiple people in this, that were CC'd on this email. So Guys is the appropriate term.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have horror stories. I have like, each wedding, there's always something where I'm like, oh my God. Like I've lost a groom's gift and we looked for it for hours and we're just all idiots because it was upside down. Yeah. We're just dumb. I dropped the most beautiful bouquet in the Mormon temple water and it froze. And it's just like every wedding I've done something kind of dumb. But then I make up for it. And I'm like, oh my God,
yeah.
this is embarrassing, but this is meant to happen. I think there's been so many. I think I'm at over 200 weddings.
Oh my gosh. We'll have to, I think we should designate another episode where it's just, we'll put it on the Patreon.
I'll just write it down and be like, dear God,
yes,
like you don't want to do this. Yeah, we laugh about stuff like, could you imagine if this happened or if that happened? Horror stories for us are probably way different than, bride and groom stories. Like their cake didn't show up. It was a horror story. And I'm like, actually, your cake fell off the back of the wagon because, who knows?
Right, exactly.
Who knows? I think a lot of it we've had some horror stuff after weddings.
I would agree with that too.
Where like expectations were different. And we've had this talk again in communication. Like those tend to be worse, or they'll email me and be like, well, I don't have this picture or yada, yada. And I'm like, well, they were pretty drunk. Mm-hmm. Like you can't have that picture. Sorry. And their eyes were closed and I'm not going to deliver that. Or people ask for the raws, which they don't even understand.
Yep.
They can't open a raw file and they're going to want it. And I'll send them like the worst picture on their cards and be like, here you go. This is what you would be getting. And they're like, well, I can't open it. I'm like, exactly. But here's a screenshot. This is what it looks like.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't get asked that anymore. I'm sure video, you guys get asked a lot more because
we do, because they want all of that footage from the day. And which is really strange. No,
you don't.
There's no reason. Half of the shots, sometimes I forget to hit stop recording and it's pointed towards the ground.
Yeah, I do that all the time with photo. But speeches, I get things like that. And when the speeches come up and we're at weddings, I'll take 3 or 4 pictures and then I get out of the way because their mouths are open. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to deliver that, and I don't want to be in the videographer's way. Horror story. For me. The videographers, a team of 2, they set up their camera, from like where we are, this is the bride and groom sitting at the head table, they put their camera in direct of their faces with 2 cameras pointing at them. Every shot that I have has 2 big giant cameras in the way, and I get that toasts are important, but again, that's where like your learning comes in. Mm-hmm. Figure it out. Like, yeah, you're going to have to learn from this. You can't do that. And then I shot another wedding with him a month later or something. And I knew better. And I'm like, okay, you can't put your stuff there. And I showed him an example. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I never knew that. Mm-hmm. Like, well, there's a learning example.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, it was great having you on. Do you have anything that you want to like plug? Anything coming up that you're doing? Any classes, anything like that people could?
I think we're kind of planning a styled shoot. I don't know. I don't know yet. I have a couple dream locations that I really want to look into, but I've got a beginner's class that'll happen in January. It always happens in January because it's a slow month for us. We do have Portraits for a Cause, which I'm going to kind of drop that on here, but a bunch of photographers getting together, get back to the community. I lead that every year. Carrie Hutchins, another photographer, we always lead that up. But not really. We're kind of going into the last part of our wedding season that, I've got a wedding next weekend. It'll be Wyoming, and then I have to travel to Colorado the next day. And luckily that's not very far. It's all driving distance, but no, we're just in our busy season. And then it'll be back to editing and completing it, sending it off. And then by December, I'm going to be like, I hate being a wedding photographer. By February, I'm going to be like, am I even good at being a photographer? Am I good at this? Should they be paying me? And then May hits and we're just off to the races, and we'll see each other only at weddings again.
Yep, that's about how it goes. Yeah. What's your Instagram and what's your website name so people can find you?
It's just my name, like super exciting. It's Amber Renee Photography.com. Photographer, it's on my wall. Amber Photographer, AmberReneePhotographer.com, I think. And Instagram is the same. It's just my name and my handle.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on again. It was a great episode, and we'll see you guys later.
I know they didn't want to come down and hang out with me, but...
Awesome. Well, it was good talking to you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah.